This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, ho there, it's Jeff Carter Diamond. Welcome you to a very sad sports catastrophe on this day because it was one of the worst moments in history, in sports history. 10 years ago, in 2011, one of the greatest crashes in sports history happened when the plane carrying the Lokomotiv Yaroslavl team on their way to a game crashed. And everyone except for one person died. So basically, Yak Service Flight 9633, a charter flight, crashed near Yaroslavl. They were trying to get to another game. As I said, all but one of the people on board, 45 people on board, died. The aircraft overran the runway, struck an antenna mast, catch fire, and crashed on the bank of the Volga River. They were on their way to Minsk to start the 2011 season, Continental Hockey League season. All the players from the main roster and 4 from the youth team were on board and died. The only survivor was the aircraft's mechanic. That must be amazing. There was an investigation that said that several factors contributed to it. Poor training, incorrect calculation of takeoff speed with the flight crew, and just improperly putting your feet on the pedals. And it was also revealed that the pilot had used falsified documents to obtain permission to fly the aircraft. And all that. Lokomotiv. So, to give you context, Lokomotiv was one of the top hockey teams in Russia. Established in 1959, they actually won the Russian Open Championship in 1997, 2002, 2003, and actually were finalists in 08 and 09, making it to the third round of the playoffs 4 straight seasons. Lokomotiv lost the KHL conference finals to HCMPD in 2010 in 7 games and was off a conference finals loss to Atlanta Moscow Oblast. There were players who were going to make their debut with the team, including 2 former NHLers, Ruslan Saleh from Belarus and Carlos Strakins from Latvia. Igor Korolev and Brad McCrimmon were going to make their coaching debuts. This was actually the second Russian team to perish in a plane crash. The entire Moscow team in 1950 died in a plane crash, which had several good Soviet Union players. So anyway, on the day of the accident, the weather at the airport was good, with light winds, good visibility, and a decent temperature of 18 Celsius. The Yak 42 entered the runway. And all that. After the aircraft was cleared for takeoff, it accelerated, but it failed to lift off. Then it ran off past the end of the runway for 400 meters before lifting off, but then hit the beacon tower 450 meters from the end of the runway and didn't climb more than 20 feet off the ground. With the impact of the mast, the aircraft veered left and crashed on the riverbank of the Todoshanka River, 200 meters from where it joins the Volga River. Basically, the tail section came to rest in the water, and the location of the wreckage was 2 kilometers from the end of the railway. Basically, the aircraft was bursting into flames after hitting the mast, and debris hit hard. So there were a lot of things. So everyone, as we said, everyone minus the mechanic, Alex Sezoff, died. It's amazing that he was in the passenger cabin, but he survived. They did recover everyone's bodies from the scene, so basically, at least there were no missing bodies. Sezoff, alongside another player, Alex Galimov, were severely burned but were conscious and went to Moscow for treatment. Sadly, though, Galimov died before surgery. Sezoff was moved from intensive care to a ward and was discharged from the hospital in October 2011. So let me give you a thing about all the players. Vitaly Kiriko, and of course, I do have pronunciation issues with European names, so bear with me. was a defenseman, 24, died. Mikhail Baladin, 31, defenseman, dead. Jerry Churlioff, center, from died. Pavel Dimitra, one of the first main names there by alphabetical order. Dimitra was a Slovakian legend, just as good as Peter Stastny, and Dimitra was a go-getter for St. Louis among other teams. Dimitra actually was credited with getting Slovakia to the semifinals of the 2010 Winter Olympics hockey tournament, where he struck a post or had a major shot saved by Roberto Luongo in the semifinals that could have sent Slovakia and Canada to overtime, but no. Defenseman Robert Dietrich, 25 years old. Left winger Alex Gallimov, 26. He almost survived it, died. Marat Kalimunian, 23 years old, defenseman, died. Alex Kalyanin, 23, right winger. Andrei Kurukin, 24-year-old right winger. Nikita Kliukin, 21-year-old center. Stefan Leaf, 30-year-old Swedish goaltender. Stefan Leaf, I can't remember I know he played in the Detroit system, I think, but he was a star for, I would say, HB71 because I remember playing like NHL hockey and he would be on it. Yeah, he played for 9 years in HB71 and was in the Detroit organization for a little bit before moving to Russia. So yeah, that was a tough break. I mean, he was an icon for HB71 in the nets. Jan Marek, 31-year-old Czech center. Sergei Ostapchuk, 21-year-old left winger, died. Karl Rakunik, former Ottawa Senator, 32 years old defenseman, died. Ruslan Saleh, 36, from Belarus. He was a defenseman. He died in the crash. He made his debut in KHL. And it was like shocking. And all that. Ruslan Saleh played many years for Anaheim and a few other teams. But yeah, going back to Russia to play. Maxim Shuvalov, defenseman, 18 years old, died. Carlos Krakens, defenseman, 37 years old, from Latvia. I believe he has the record for most consecutive games played by a defenseman. He played many years for Nashville. That's where I know him from. He had 495 games played. That was the record. That is still the record for a defenseman. 495 games. That's amazing. Pavel Suminichin, 19 years old, forward from Russia, died. Daniel Sobchenko, 20-year-old center. Ivan Tachenko, 31-year-old left winger. Pavel Trakhanov, 33-year-old defenseman. Yuri Urichev, 20-year-old defenseman. Josef Vasicek, 30-year-old center, who played for Carolina in the Cinderella run to the 2002 finals, if I remember correctly. I think he played for Chicago and Philly too. I can't remember. Alex Vasilyanov, 23-year-old left winger. Alex Fyukin, 38-year-old goalie. And Artem Yarchuk, 21-year-old left winger. They all died. The team staff killed. Alex Karpatsev was the assistant coach. Karpatsev, whatever pronunciation you go, was a top-notch defenseman for the Rangers and the Leafs for many years. Igor Korolev, assistant coach, died at age 41. Korolev played many years for Winnipeg and Chicago, among others, and Phoenix, I think. And Brad McCrimmon, 52-year-old head coach, died. McCrimmon was a stay-at-home defenseman who was huge for the Detroit Red Wings back in the 1980s and 90s. Well, the goaltender coach actually was not on the aircraft because he stayed behind to work for the junior team. It was terrible. The Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, who was on his way to Yaroslav for the Global Policy Forum, sent his condolences to the families and visited the crash site alongside the governor of Yaroslav Oblast. Rene Fossil, who was president of the IIHF, the International Hockey Federation, said that it was the darkest day in the history of the sport. And Yaroslava had a 3-day period of mourning between September 9th and September 11th, 2011. Upon hearing the news, the Continental Hockey League actually stopped the UFA Atlet Moscow game that was being played. It was suspended in the second period. And the teams left to go to a nearby church. Minsk, where Yaroslavl was supposed to play, had a requiem mass to celebrate the death. The KHL would resume September 12th. On September 10th, 2011, the main funeral died, and it was 100,000 people, roughly, at Lokomotiv's home arena. Lokomotiv could not participate in the KHL season for obvious reasons. Dallas saluted Carlos Krakens by putting a decal with his number on the helmet for other players. He also fast-checks former team, the Carolina Hurricanes, wore a commemorative patch on their jerseys. Detroit wore a patch with the initials of Ruslan Soleil and Brad McCrimmon and Stefan Leave. The Ducks would embroil Soleil's number 24 on their jerseys. The Devils wore a patch for former Devils players Karl Rakunek and Alex Yazunov. St. Louis had a ceremony for former players Pavel Dmitry and Igor Korolev before their game against the Blackhawks. They would wear a special 38 sticker on their helmets, as they both wore 38 as a member of the Blues. 10,000 fans and relatives of Stefan Leif went to a funeral in Sweden. Slovakia decided to retire Pavel Dimitri's number 38 from the national team. He actually retired from the national team on home ice at the World Championship. It was just spooky and all that. Germany decided to retire Robert Dietrich's number 20 in their national system. Latvia would then decide to retire Skarsen's number 7 from Latvian teams and all that. The Czech national team decided to take out Karl Rakunek's number 4, Jan Marek's number 15, and Josef Vasicek's number 63 out of circulation. So Lokomotiv chose to cancel its participation and would play in the Russian Major League, the second highest thing, and we're out of the VHL playoffs. Yak Service had his operation license revoked, and as I said, that there was a lot of problems, including the co-pilot. All that. So basically, it was just terrible. In fact, the deputy head of the airline Yak Service was charged with breaching air safety rules. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In fact, the plane crash was featured in the Canadian show Mayday. About what happened. Lokomotiv hockey team disaster. I didn't know that was there. Yeah, it was on Mayday. That talks about. There were a lot of accidents involving sports teams with car crashes and all, with plane crashes. So from aviation, the Notre Dame football lost their star football coach Knute Rockne, who was actually moving who was headed for California to see production of a movie based on his story. Czechoslovakia lost 6 members of their national team on their way to Britain for the 1940, somewhere in 1940. I don't know if it was for the national title, but no. Torino's soccer team lost everybody after crashing off of a hill, trying to get to the Turin airport after a European match. As I said, VPS Moscow suffered. The entire team was killed in a crash. In 1956, a Czech squad died. TJ Banek Chumanov. Saskatchewan and Winnipeg lost some players. 5 players were killed returning home from the CFL All-Star game in Vancouver in 1962. It would crash into a mountain near Chilliwack. Of course, one of the stories I did for On This Day was February 6, 1958, when Man U lost a lot of people in a crash in Munich on their way back to Manchester after facing a Serbian team in the Champions Red Star Belgrade in the European Cup. So yeah, it could have been a lot worse. All that. August 1958, the Egyptian national fencing team lost some players. Denmark lost some players trying to get to the Olympic soccer things. Cal Poly lost 16 members in an aviation crash in 1960. The U.S. figure skating team in 1961 lost all their members on their way to the World Figure Skating Championships in Prague. That crash canceled the World Figure Skating Championships, and Prague got it back in 62. Some Chilean soccer teams crashed. Italy had 8 members of their national swimming team die in a crash in 1966 in West Germany. The strongest, one of the best squads in Bolivia, they lost many members in a crash in September 69. Wichita State lost many players crashing on the route to face Utah State. There was another plane with reserve players and assistant coaches landed at Logan, Utah. Marshall suffered a massive crash in 1970 when trying to fly back to campus after playing East Carolina, and 46 people died. And Marshall had to rebuild their program from that. The Old Christians Club rugby team crashed in the Andes and resorted to cannibalism. So, yeah, that was a crash. That was a massive crash. It was the basis of the movie Alive. Graham Hill's auto racing team crashed trying to return from the Circuit Paul Ricard in France back to England. It included Graham Hill, who piloted the plane. Graham Hill, who was a 2-time F1 champion. We know his son Damon, of course. The University of Evansville had a big crash in 1977. We're trying to get to a game against Middle Tennessee. What's even worse is that the sole team member who did not board the plane died in a car crash 2 weeks later, ironically. A lot of things about that is that there was a story that Jerry Sloan, who I think I did on this day about, but anyway, Jerry Sloan stayed in Evansville and didn't want to be coach of the Purple Aces. But then he had to take the reins after the crash in 77. And, Jerry Sloan coached 2 decades with the Utah Jazz. LSU lost their coach, Bo Ryan, when his plane flew well off course and crashed in the Atlantic Ocean off of Virginia. The U.S. amateur boxing team crashed in 1980 in Poland. Let's see. Alan Kowicki, who was a star driver, and I don't remember if he won the NASCAR championship. I think he was like second or something like that. I don't think he won a title. Oh no, he did. He won the 1992 Winston Cup by the closest margin in NASCAR history. And then, ironically, April Fool's Day, 1993, no joke, Kowicki was killed on approach to Tri-Cities Regional Airport. The Zambian national soccer team died in 93 when they faced somebody. The only player that wasn't killed was their captain, Kalusha Balila, who was with his European squad and got spared. The Zambian team actually rebounded and were a win away. If they had beaten Morocco, they would have gotten to the 94 World Cup, and it would have been one of the greatest Cinderella stories in history, but they failed. Let's see here. Hendrick Motorsports had a massive plane crash that killed team president John Hendrick and former driver Ricky Hendrick. Locomotive, yeah, that crashed. Oklahoma State lost their women's basketball coach in a crash in Arkansas. We all know about the Chappaqua, the Chapel crash. the soccer team that crashed. They were on their way to the Copa Sudamerica finals, which is, they have the Copa Libertadores, the top ones, but Sudamerica is kind of like the UEFA Cup, the Europa League in Europe. But anyway, against Atlético Nacional. 3 players did survive the crash. Atlético Nacional actually forfeited the title to Chapo to be champions. And this year, Palma suffered a crash. They were trying to fly to Goiânia for an away game against Villanova in the Copa Verde, a competition played between the 24 teams of the North and Central West regions of Brazil. Yeah, there were a lot of crashes, a lot of bus crashes, and all that. One of the biggest bus crashes was Swift Current in 1986, killing 4 members of their team. The California Angels survived a bus crash that almost ruined them. Buck Rogers and 4 players were injured. Manager Buck Rogers and 4 players were injured when the bus ran off the New Jersey Turnpike and almost crashed down. Bathurst High School had a fan crash that killed 7 members of their team and a teacher. And of course, we all know about Humboldt's bus crash, April 6th, that killed 16 people, 13 injured, and many of them are getting back to normal. So, sad times at all, but this is one accident that really shook up the world of aviation and shook up how sports teams can just go in an instant. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Thanks for watching.